Welcome everybody to Runescape Ladies Night. It's been a long time since we've had an episode of this, but we had a special subject we wanted to cover tonight and actually have a new co-host with me tonight for the first time on a RuneScape Weekly podcast. We have Alice. How are you doing, Alice?
I am doing well. Thanks for introducing me and including me on Ladies Night.
Yeah, you contacted me a while ago about potentially wanting to do some kind of show together at some point, and it's finally worked out, and we're finally doing this. We don't have many details beyond what this show is as to what we might do next, but, you know, I'm sure there'll be more stuff coming in the future, so just keep an eye out. And, Alice, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your history with RuneScape. How long have you been playing for? Maybe an embarrassing moment from your playing history, something like that.
Sure. So I started playing with RuneScape Classic, hoping to grab my 15-year cape later this year. And I'm a quester, so I do mostly quests, but I'm also trying to keep my max cape with each skill that comes out. And as far as embarrassing moments go, I traded a white party hat for 12 lobsters, and that was a good deal at that time.
Oh my god.
So I don't think I'll ever catch up since then.
It's a hard thing to get back to. Yeah. Wow, playing it since Classic. I didn't know that. You might be, I think you and Mage are the only two people who I know who have played since Classic. So yeah, I will be jealous when you get your 15-year cape. That cape is super beautiful.
Yeah, I think I'm right behind Mage Bit by probably a few months, so... But I'm rocking my bunny ears now and then, so just to show off that pride.
Very nice. All right. Well, before we get too much into the show, main part of the show, I just do want to remind people that I do stream on Twitch. You can find me at Queen of Blaze on Twitch. You can also help fund the PVM Perspective podcast at tip.runeweek.com. There's a new episode of that coming out soon. I don't know if this episode or that episode will be out first, so if that episode hasn't come out, this came out first, then you'll be getting that in the next couple of days. Anyways, today we are going to be talking about LGBT representation in video games, and really primarily how that applies to RuneScape. Kind of talk about the history of LGBT characters in the game, what characters we know are or have been hinted at as being LGBT, and Alice has kind of put this together herself, kind of brought all the topics to me. She also wrote some of the articles in here, so it's a lot of information brought together by her. It's gonna kind of be a breakdown of the history and kind of trying to go in some kind of chronological order of events and how certain things unfolded. As we all know, the Light Within, I think I always get Within the Light and Light Within mixed up, but whichever one, I think it was the Light Within.
Yeah, the Light Within, yeah.
It's going to be a big focus about today's show and the character that came out with that, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce yet, but probably will have to at some point. Anyways, I will hand it over to you, Alice.
Yeah, so as people may or may not be aware, JX has always had queer characters in RuneScape, whether we were aware of them for some time or not. So those are some things I want to talk about. But to give a little history first, when the Player Examine feature came out a few years ago, it was a way of players being able to describe themselves. And what happened was I immediately went to that Player Examine feature and I was like, yes, I'm going to describe myself as lesbian and transgender. And to my dismay, those words were still censored, even though the chat censor had been lifted or was toggleable. So I took to the forums and saw that someone wrote an article called LGBT Isn't a Dirty Word by Nabe, 8 A's. And to summarize that post on the forum was basically saying, hey, now that the chat has, the censor has been lifted, why can't we use these words in RuneScape? Why can't we use lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender? Etc. And that kind of led to me wondering, are there any gay or queer characters in RuneScape? And
it's before we get into it a little bit further, it's funny to me talking about the player examine thing, because I did the exact same thing where I went in there. I think I probably first tried to put lesbian, and it didn't take that, and then I just tried to put gay, and it wouldn't take that. So I ended up putting gamer, spelled Gay. That way, I would actually it would take something, because
and that's what I did too. That's the only way to really get around it.
Yeah, you basically have to trick it. It is super silly and archaic that system is still in place, and it's still that way to this day.
Yeah, it is.
It would be awesome if Drax would fix that.
It would be, especially since their stance and things have been changing for queer people and queer players in RuneScape. So it'd be nice if they took a double look back on that, especially when we have the toggleable examine feature.
Yeah.
So when I found out that I couldn't put, those acronyms or into the player examine feature, I kind of looked at myself in the game, and I said, hey, what's the deal with this? And I'm wondering, are there any queer characters in RuneScape? And so I took quite a bit of time to just kind of peruse through the entire Wikia and characters I suspected that were queer, and various mentionings of it on the RuneScape forum and Reddit and all that stuff. And what I came up with is an article that I wrote for femhype.com. And I'm not normally a writer, but that article was the quest for diversity in MMORPGs and LGBTQIA plus research in RuneScape. So what resulted in is that I found out that that we have 2 gay characters at the time, and this was back in 2015. So we had 2 gay characters and a possible bisexual character in RuneScape. And the unfortunate matter of that is that 2 of those characters were killed off in Daemonheim during the Vengeance Saga. So, and technically,
what are their names?
I have their names right here. It says when you examine their 2 bodies on the ground, it says, at least he was with his beloved Cavell till the end. He never left Morvas' side. So Cavell and Morvas, and that's something you come across. It's like a very you would never know unless you examined the 2 bodies on the ground during the Vengeance Saga in Daemonheim, which I did. So luckily for me, I found that. But and then
not really front and center, kind of a Easter egg type thing.
Yeah, it was a definitely Easter egg thing, and as we know in the Vengeance Saga, there's just bodies littered the floor. So. And the image of Cavell and Morvas side by side, their hands are, their ball of a hand is both like reaching out towards each other, as though like they were trying to hold hands just at those final moments, and they weren't able to.
It sounds a lot. It sounds a lot like Rogue One. I don't know if you've seen that, but I'm a giant Star Wars nerd, and there's like that couple in there that is probably. It's probably 2 gay men as a couple, but it's never actually confirmed in that entire thing. But it's just like a whole arc between them, and they're both like some kind of protectors of some ancient Jedi thing. Anyways, this story just kind of reminds me similarly to that.
Right, and this is something that really prompted me after the research was, I love queer characters, and I love queer characters in great storytelling, and I felt that the Vengeance Saga was great storytelling without because some people like to say like shoving it down your throat, but it was so subtle that people didn't even realize it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's cool to see that kind of representation, but it's also, I think, worth pointing out that it's also in many ways kind of problematic representation, because there's a huge history in media of killing off your gay characters.
Right, and that's what upset me off so much, because when I did my research, I'm like, okay, so we had 2 gay characters, and they're immediately dead. Like, they didn't even last. They didn't even last the quest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when I was doing that research, I I was like, okay, so we got 2 dead gay characters, and we really didn't get to explore their personality or anything like that. But and the story of them lying side by side when you examine it is heartbreaking. So the only other character that we really had that I found at the time was Zanuck, and Zanuck is possibly bisexual according to Mod Raven, and the evidence of that is Zanuck's potential love interest in the player, depending on if you play as a female character or a male character, that could lead to that narrative. But I found a post on the RuneScape official forum by Mod Raven, and it's a little bit of a short quote, so I'll just kind of quote it word for word. But it's back in 2013, and a player asked that if JX had any plans to introduce LGBT NPCs into RuneScape in the future. And Mod Raven said, I thought I'd just answer this one fairly quickly. First off, JX is an inclusive company, and so we certainly have a few LGBT mods, but it's not my place to list them here. Also, there are actually already been 1 or 2 LGBT NPCs in game. Admittedly, they died quickly, and that's when we're talking about the Vengeance Saga, but I was quite proud of getting them into game. If you look carefully at the Vengeance Saga, you'll be able to find the 2 original team lying next to each other, fingers inching away from one another as though their last moments were together. Whether we see more in the future, I could not say. Certainly, I would imagine that some of the existing characters might be, hint, hint, right there, and but it's not been significant to the content they were involved in. Edit. Mod John A just confirmed to me that Zanuck can actually be considered bisexual, in part because of her potentially romantic interest in the player, Raven. So
that's also
that was
kind of funny. That also has some problematic elements into it, in where like original bi representation or any gay representation in video games, that was basically all it was is your character, if you had a character choice and you choose female, what's that character still romanceable? Which is also kind of, once again, a little bit of, it's more lazy. It's game devs try to pat themselves on the back for it, and not to say that it's not appreciated, but it's late. Like, it's easier to write quests to make dialogue that way, right? That it works with either.
Oh yeah,
character.
Totally. I agree. And a lot of these characters are not perfect representations.
Yeah, I mean,
by far.
And it's interesting. I know this comes in later, but I'm kind of going to bring it up now because it's actually something that I thought about like pretty quickly after I first came back to RuneScape 3, and that is, of course, Makeover Mage, who has been in the game, I think, since 2002, maybe? I can't remember. It might have even been 2001, but either way, I'm pretty sure since Classic has been in the game, and they are non-binary, which, of course, is very easy for people not to even think about it. It's honestly a fascinating, like, character study to me in general, is how no one who plays RuneScape ever thinks about Makeover Mage and their gender and how different it is from anybody else who exists because of the tie-in with that's where you go to change your gender as a character. I don't know, RuneScape I think completely accidentally, like, I don't know if the Gowers try this at all. I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong about that. I don't think they've ever said anything, but like, it's somehow like is one of the greatest examples in video games as to how to handle gender. Like, it's just something that you can change whenever your whim hits you, and the person who controls that is just another person who's just every 5 minutes switching their representation. I don't know. It's such a brilliant way to handle something that a lot of video games screw up terribly.
Right. Can I piggyback off that a little bit? Because I do want to talk about Makeover Mage. So, and that's one NPC that I missed in my initial article that I wrote, and someone pointed that out, and so I looked up the Makeover Mage, and in issue 5 of the Postbag from the Hedge, which was from 2006, a player wrote to the Makeover Mage to ask what their name was, because there's not a name for the Makeover Mage, right?
Yeah.
And so JX wrote back saying, my name is Pete or Peta, depending on my mood. And I found that really interesting.
Yeah, it's really well written. I don't like, it surprises me too that, like, as far as I know, this game was made by a bunch of cis white dudes. None of them have come out as anything differently, but like,
right.
I know plenty of non-binary trans people who would consider that like a fantastic description of themselves. And
right. And that's what I thought was so amazing, is that I'm like, whoa, back in 2006, I don't think it was intentional, but 2006 we at least had a confirmation of that, and possibly even further.
Yeah, and I would love to know. It's probably like if I ever sat down and interviewed the Gowers, it would probably be like top question I would have, and I imagine I probably would not get an answer that would satisfy me because they probably don't even remember. But I want to know.
Right.
How they came up with that, because I agree, I don't necessarily think it was on purpose. It would be amazing to find out it was, but yeah, who knows.
Honestly, being the lore hound that I am, and just how much I love quests in RuneScape, I would love to see like an in-depth quest on the Makeover Mage, similar to how they did the Wise Old Man, who was just kind of a guy that was there, and then all of a sudden they have this huge backstory.
Oh, I totally agree. They are like absolutely my favorite character in RuneScape. So like I would love to see that. It was funny. Like I guess it's like a year and a half ago now. We had I can't think of the mod's name, but we had him on to talk about. Can't think of the name of anything today. What was the name of the card game that JX made?
Chronicle.
Yeah, Chronicle. We had the one mod on to talk about Chronicle, and he asked us who we wanted in a card, and I said Makeover Mage, and he had no idea why. But yeah, I think it would be cool to see.
Did that ever happen?
Quest. I don't think it did. I didn't keep up with the game because they didn't release the Mac version until the game had already died. So
yeah, right.
I've never played it.
That's a whole topic in itself. Chronicle.
It is. But yeah, Makeover Mage in a quest would be amazing.
It would be totally amazing, and it could go so many different directions, and it's an interesting part of RuneScape, because the Makeover Mage also can help the player change their skin tone in the game. So that's also another, like, no other NPC can do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you want to move on to the next kind of topic? I'll kind of get the ball rolling on that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the High Level forums, but it's a forum on the RuneScape official forums that are for max players, and it has less significance now, but a few years ago it was still pretty hopping, and JMods frequently responded to threads in there. It was like a more direct line and get a JMon response or get your ideas or suggestions heard or whatever it may be. So soon as I maxed in 2015, I immediately went to the high-low forums and was like, can we get more queer characters in RuneScape? I posted that thread and I made a reference to my research I had done on the existing characters. And it was met with a lot of venom by the high-level forum community, and it just turned into a complete, torrent and cesspool of just trolling and just horribleness. But after a few months, I eventually got a JMod reply, and I want to dive into those in just a second. But during those few months, while players were discussing, if you can call it that, on that thread, about why RuneScape should or should not have more queer characters in the game and how they should be introduced, The Light Within came out. And that introduced the first, as far as we know, trans woman called Angoff. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, but she's a trans woman elf, and she's the first transgender character in the game that we were aware of, and it got me really excited.
Well, besides Makeover Mage.
What's that?
I said, well, besides Makeover Mage, unless you didn't know about Makeover Mage at this point.
Right. Unless at the time we had no idea.
Gotcha.
Right. So, but yes. So is the Makeover Mage human though?
I mean, I think so. I think she just qualified. To me, I mean, she wouldn't be a trans woman, right? She would be a non-binary trans person who had learned through magic how to just change her gender at will. I mean, that's kind of how I read her as a character.
Yeah.
Or right. Them as a character. But I mean, of course, we don't we don't actually know the details on that because we've never seen a quest. So maybe, once again, Jagex, tell us the details. Come on now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, all we got is a post baked from the hedge from 2006. But yeah, I guess Angoff is the first trans woman elf then.
Yeah, or even just I think first trans woman works fine too. Just not the first trans person, but the first trans woman for 100% for sure.
I gotcha. So and I was pretty shocked when that happened because it happened just a few months after I posted that thread in the high level forums, and I'm like, did they see that? Because they haven't responded to it yet, and pretty much I dropped everything to play The Light Within, and The Light Within was a winning player idea by Gaga Lady, who's a well-known player in the community.
Yeah, I believe at the time, I don't know if she still runs it, but at the time she was running like a giant LGBT FC and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So one thing I did find out that I did get from Gaga Lady was an exchange between Mod Raven and Gaga Lady about kind of like putting their stamp on the quest, since it won the Rune Labs poll. And I'll just kind of read that quote real quick. So the exchange between the two is Raven says, "So I'm writing a new character and a few backstories, and this is your quest suggestion. So I wonder if you have any requests." And Gaga Lady responds with, "I don't think so, though I do run an RS LGBT community events and know that you previously implemented subtle LGBT characters in the Dungeoneering saga, so something small like that would be neat, though I can understand why that wouldn't be done." And then Raven says, "Okay, anything else to put your stamp on it? I can try and fit something more appropriate in there. It's the wrong character to do anything big with, but I might be able to get into the background somewhere. Is there anything else we can do to give you a little sort of in-game recognition? I can't use Gaga Lady, unfortunately, but do you have a nickname or something we could incorporate?" And I'm wondering if that name was Angoff.
Yeah, no, yeah, that'd be interesting to know because I know that the transcript cuts off there.
Right,
but that's possible because I don't know where else that name would have really come from.
It might be Welsh because I know some of the elven names are Welsh. So, but I don't speak Welsh. Maybe. Welsh listeners, let us know.
There we go.
Right. So that was kind of interesting to me that got put into the quest, which also problematic again because it was super subtle and it was like optional dialogue. So like unless you were trying to complete the quest in its entirety in not spacebarring through like the whole thing, you would have never known. Yeah, as far as
also in my opinion, I think probably the best done on purpose character. Like I'm tempted to almost not count Makeover Mage as on purpose or a quote unquote actual representation. I think they just lucked in to doing that properly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like you can't unless you don't want to make everything about. And of course you know this, but I'm just saying this for the audience. You don't want to make everything about LGBT people about their identity necessarily. So leaving it as something that is not a huge focus is okay. To me, it would have been cool. It'd be, I think the big issue is that she's not prominent in the quest, and that it could have been like you only have to talk to her for like 5 seconds to actually do the quest. Whereas like if we had quests where we had like an LGBT main character, that would be super great.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was trying to go with it too. Is that I want them to be a focus, or a main character, or at least have a large role in a quest, but not the entire quest be about their gender identity or their sexual orientation or like some romance that they're pursuing. I would like to. I just like having LGBT characters that also are like full in their personality and history beyond just being queer.
Yeah. Absolutely agree.
Right. And some people obviously noticed that, and came with mixed reviews. But do you want to first talk about how that was received, or do you want to talk about specifically like what was written diary, or do you kind of just want to talk about that response to that?
I guess we can cover the diary. Yeah, let's cover the diary part first, because most people probably don't even know what's referenced there. So.
Okay, so yeah, let me grab the. Oh, so in her diary, because there's a rare drop by, what are those called? The crystal shapeshifters.
Yeah.
Those the drops the wedding ring, and then you can present that to Engoff, who kind of dives into her history a little bit more. But there's a page in the diary, which I have up now, it says day 3. The pain is unbearable. I need more crystal. I can barely think about anything else, but I know that I have to resist. I have to fight off that urge, that craving. I know that the crystal will hurt me, consume me, and destroy me. And I know that with absolute clarity, and yet I still can't think about anything else. Day 5, the pain is still there, always present, always reminding me, but I feel I am better able to resist it today. I've been without the crystal for 5 days now, and while it's agony, I'm feeling a little more like myself. In many ways, I am more myself than I've ever really been. No longer that little boy that felt trapped in a skin that was never really his own. And I think that's the important and specific reference that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, it's very, very, very well written. So they did a good job with writing it, for sure. And yeah. So how did the community receive it?
So you can imagine the typical response of like, why did this character need to be in this quest? Like, it just seems, the word shoehorn is as frequently mentioned, and I would immediately disagree with the word shoehorn in regards to how Engoff was handled.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the automatic queerphobic response.
Right. So, but then, as far as like the LGBT community, as I can't speak for all of them because we're not a monolith, but my clan personally really enjoyed that, and some didn't because they hate quests, but like they were okay with it. They loved the reference. It talked about how Engoff was just feels more like her authentic self, and that's pretty much exactly how a lot of trans people would describe that journey or that experience in and it goes across the whole LGBT board. It's just being your authentic self. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that quest. I didn't get to it in 2015. I mean, it's funny because I remember when it came out for sure. I remember the story around it, and there was definitely negative feedback. There was a lot of positive feedback too. That I think unfortunately, in any part of society, there's always going to be a negative part. But like in general, we talked about this a week or two ago, and we talked about the terrible shit that went on in the old school RuneScape community like a month ago. Like, I feel like the predominant part of the RSV community is extremely accepting, and then there's like this minority that's kind of gross and is not, or at least that's the perception that I get. It's always hard to know that stuff for sure, but at least that's how it feels to me.
Right. And then, well, I don't know, the community that we are involved in. I mean, there's beautiful pockets of queerness, mostly contained to FCs and clans, I feel. And then there's the broader, RuneScape majority, I guess, so to say. But I feel like most people just don't care or even pay attention. I think Reddit's particularly focused on that, or vocal about the characters.
Yeah.
Going back to Engoff, though, there's another little snippet here that I really liked as well, where once you find that wedding ring, it opens up another bit of dialogue post quest, and the player, you go, "Hey, I found this ring," and then she goes, "Oh, let me look at that. No, that was Maldwin. He was my husband. That's my husband's ring." And then you just like immediately go, "I'm sorry," and then she goes, "I don't blame you. I imagine he left you little choice, and if I'm truthful, I lost him long ago." So the player asks about Maldwin, And she goes, "It's painful to talk about him, but I'll try. What would you like to know?" And then you ask, "Where did you meet?" And she goes, "We grew up together originally before we both lost ourselves to the crystal. We used to run through the forest together playing the games that young boys tend to play." And then you don't interrupt, and she continues, "We grew apart as the crystals took a greater hold on us, and we found each other again a few years back, and we became each other's rock. We would keep each other away from the crystals, and we supported each other through the most painful times. And we weren't perfect. We failed more than once, and we were there to help each other back again. And when we did, eventually he proposed to me, and I accepted. But that was a long time ago." And then the player goes, "Wait, young boys?" And then Ingolf goes, "Yes, this body was born incorrectly male. I changed that." And then the player says, "You weren't always female?" And Ingolf says, you say that as though it is unusual. We are shapeshifters. Gender to us is hardly constant. Sometimes we are born into a body that is not ours. Without the crystal, that would be the end of it. But I was fortunate enough to be able to correct that mistake. And what I was is irrelevant. What I am is all that matters. And then that's kind of where the relevant piece stops.
There's getting a little bit more. I mean, in my opinion, it's like a little bit misunderstanding of gender, which I don't need to fully get into on this show.
Right.
Although I think, once again, a good effort, but obviously, like, it could have been written slightly better, but I still appreciate it as what it is.
Right, and that's how I felt too. Just the whole body was born and etc. thing. But it just I guess it just kind of lays down the groundwork of what they're able to do, and we can critique that and suggest changes as players. So that part really kind of struck me as bittersweet, just because I was like, oh, sweet, more dialogue about this. And then I'm like, not exactly how I describe the, that feeling. But I wonder, do you know who wrote specifically that dialogue?
No, I don't. I don't think JX credits mods like that. I mean, from the fact that Raven's the one who reached out, it wouldn't surprise me if he was the one who wrote it specifically, but that's only just guessing off of, the conversation he had with Gaga Lady and not really anything else.
Yeah, I guess best guess there. I guess I would assume Raven would have done that, but good attempt, I guess. But this,
I think another important thing to say whether it's queer representation or even representation of women or people of color, you always need not just one person, but multiple people like that in a room when you're doing stuff like that. So don't want a bunch of white dudes writing characters that are all the LGBT characters in the world. You can't understand experiences of something you don't live. So that's the importance of diversity within a company, which is something that's often talked about. Is the importance of things like that comes down to situations like this, where to best represent a character, you need to understand those experiences. And if you don't have an employee who's lived those experiences, then you're not going to be able to write that character as good as you possibly could if you did have one.
Right, and it's just kind of writing from experience type thing too, and I totally agree with that. So it could have been a lot better, and it could have been way more polished. And there's certain problematic language in there that could have been easily avoided if you had consulted someone in the community who was able to decipher that a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, what did you want to cover next?
So I want to cover some other queer characters that I found in RuneScape before we move on, because I did. So after Ingolf came out, I was like, okay, let's get down to it and see if there's any more transgender characters in RuneScape. And there's a character named Wizard Jalarast. And Wizard Jalarast was described as a man in 2004, simply named Wizard. But eventually JX modified their body, and this was later confirmed during a developer Q&A when John A said that Jella Rast no longer wanted to be a man, and as such, visited the makeover mage.
I think I remember reading about this at some point too, and I think that once again, fascinating wording. And I mean, it's just like it blows me away the dumb luck to have created a gender system that just makes you able to answer something that's simple. Because that's how it works. That's how it works in reality. Like if you want to be a girl, like you can, spoiler alert, you can just be a girl.
Right.
So like making it like that in a game is quite a good parallel, and then it just allows you to say stuff like that, which is just a great summation of how to describe things.
I think that is like a little bit reminiscent of just like how the Gowers like handled things in when it came to like post bag on the hedge or like just player questions in general, and they were just usually like simple answers. There's no like in-depth thing. It was just kind of like, yep, they just visited the makeover mage. What of it?
Yeah,
yeah, to justify changes.
It's like this simplistic. I don't know if childlike is the right word, but I think in some ways it is. Like it's just a very like, what is the most simplistic way to break this down? And so you do, and you end up with something that's actually good. Like in this case, which is kind of awesome.
Right. And that it doesn't end with Wizard Jella Rast. Gosh, I'm terrible with these names. But do you know the Oracle, right? On it's not White Wolf Mountain, it's the Ice Mountain.
Yeah.
The Oracle is really interesting to learn about. So originally the Oracle was a woman in RuneScape Classic. And here's where my classic knowledge comes into play. But in the summer of 2007, they were given a graphical makeover and appeared as a man. And then the Oracle was then redesigned as a woman again in a later update, and that's how they remain to this day. So really, it's kind of interesting that the Oracle's history. So we don't really know anything else besides like the visual changes that happened. But they went from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, and I'd be interested to kind of hear what Jacobs has to say about why they made those changes. Or it could be just dumb luck again,
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Or just like someone who didn't know. Didn't even think about it. Just I got to make this new character, and then whoops, it made it a different gender without even thinking about it. But yeah, it could be fascinating.
It really could be. So yeah, those are kind of like those were kind of the characters that have always been there or have been there for a long time, and given communities, or not the communities, but like a vocal part of the communities. Stance against including these characters, like they're already here and you had no idea.
Yeah.
But when they're a bit more prominent, that's where the uproar starts.
There's like this, this is giant misinformation campaign, against LGBT people to be, like, oh, like it's some new weird fad, and it's like, nah, we've always existed. It's just erasure is a serious problem. And so I mean, you can look back through history. You can look at like the fact that the Nazis literally burnt basically all the research we had on trans people up until that time was burnt by Nazis. All those famous book burning photos you see, a lot of that is trans and gay history going up in smoke. Setting us back like literally 100 years in research and stuff like that, but it's always
we
existed.
Really don't have much left, from that time.
Yeah, but it's like I think it's just the thing with being LGBT people being a minority is like it's easy to erase a minority. Whereas, when the default is cis and straight, like that's just what's going to take over the narrative, even though that's not the only narrative that exists.
Right. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in hearing Maud Raven's kind of response to the backlash that kind of happened with Angoff during the time.
Yeah.
Back in 2015.
Let's go
into it. So a user on the RuneScape official forums called Rant God, like, of course, perfect name for this, said, I want to make it crystal clear that I have nothing against people like that, but it does not offend me or bother me if the setting is correct. I do not believe RuneScape is the place for this kind of content, and content like this is usually kept in M-rated games, not a game directed at all ages. And this is where Mod Raven unleashes his fury, I suppose, and a well deserved response, I guess. That I found needed, just because they had remained so silent for so long on this, and it was just refreshing to see this. So he goes, interesting. Why? Being transgender is not an M-rated thing. It's not something that occurs only later in life. It's something that occurs in youth and remains throughout one's life. And the ability to do something about that feeling at an adult stage affair, yes, but not the root cause is not. Also, why shouldn't we mention this is a non-M-rated game? LGBT characters are no different to straight characters except for a few cases, and gay characters are identical to straight characters except for their romantic interests lie with the same gender. Transgender characters are no different than cisgender characters except for they are not the gender they were originally assigned. That's it. So do these differences really deserve an M rating? Clearly no. And then he just goes on to just wholeheartedly disagree with this player.
It's pretty awesome to like rip it. I mean, that argument, it's just a fundamentally. Right. It is the argument that people always turn to. Well, not people, but like it's become a popular one. It's like, I'm not homophobic. I just want it to be in private in the right place. And well, then that makes you homophobic because.
And it's the whole politics and games thing. And I'm like, politics have been in games since the beginning of video games.
Politics are everything. Like art is political. Like it's just it's literally part of it. But even beyond that, like your sexuality and gender also are not necessarily or are not a political thing until someone makes it that way, and like that's
how
not
much
your
I
choice.
wish it wasn't that way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I like if there's one thing that I want, it's just to be like I listened to some talk from a trans person recently. It's just like I just want to be bored at some point. Like I don't really want to fight over who I am. I just want to be bored in who I am. Like that's the whole. Like I don't want this to be political or something that people have to fight for their rights. But that's just like unfortunately where we are in society in many places.
Right, and I totally feel that sentiment 100%. Just I do want to be bored. I'm just so exhausted, and I hate being like just being propped up as this person within my own like in real life community of like the go-to trans person to ask, so what do you think about this? So what do you think about this? And I'm like, I just want to be bored. I don't want to be the person.
That's actually something good to mention. Like if you are a non-LGBT person out there, like the greatest thing you can really do, and I'm really more talking from a trans perspective, but I imagine this would come up from like a cis gay person's perspective too. But like, don't talk to someone about it. Like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, I really don't. Like, like if you just accept me for who I am, like then we'll be way cooler than if you're like, oh, that's fascinating. Let's spend the next hour talking about this. Because I'm not gonna have that conversation with you, and it's just gonna make us not like actually close. So like, just accept someone and don't talk about it, and that can be you may become that person's best friend just by doing that.
Oh yeah, and it's just like every time Caitlyn Jenner opens her damn mouth, it's just like, so what'd you think of I don't fucking care. Excuse my language. I don't care. I don't want to talk about her. I just don't keep. I don't know. I don't care. I don't want to talk
it's not like I come to you every time what's his name from InfoWars opens his mouth and asks you. Like, so as a white guy, like what do you have to say about this?
Yeah.
Like
it's come to you every time. Yeah. But I do want to talk a little bit more about Engop just because she's an amazing character, and she also has they talk about her because we talked about how her identity is and that story, but she also like struggles with her like an addiction, I would say on the crystals. And she's kind of defined by her struggle and by her willpower instead of her gender. And she's like overcome that huge problem that like gnaws at her constantly, as was evidence in her diary. And like she brought all the elves from, I'm gonna butcher the word, Tardiad, back towards like the great culture that they were, and that's Angoff. Like that's where I see her story continuing if they want to revisit this character.
Yeah. I mean, she stands as like basically the sole reason that the elves still exist in that place. Like,
right.
You don't see another person in that place who has enough of their sanity to actually be in their elf form and not just be crazed crystal things.
Right, and then like Saren, Maud Raven mentions, is like addictive by her very nature. You know, the love she inspires in people is tremendous power. Imagine just for a moment if everyone you met loved you, and what would life be like? What change could you wield, and would be the single most important person in the lives of thousands? But love is addictive, so I guess that's kind of where they were going with that quest. With like the elves are addicted to Saren. Would that be a good descriptor?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what shows up in a lot of her storyline. Yeah.
Yeah, and then she talked about her slow weaning off, and I kind of find that also helpful when it comes to some trans women's narratives, and not all, but like some trans women in particular are susceptible to poverty than most other folks, and in that comes like drugs and homelessness and things like that. And I kind of enjoyed that small parallel because I personally have struggled with addiction, and I kind of found myself in that narrative, as weird as it sounds, that they put in there with Angoff and how she wanted to.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's that weird. I think the crystals are very much obviously like it's supposed to be a parallel to other types of addictions that we're used to, you know. And so yeah, I can definitely see how that would be a super effective / moving part of the story.
Right. So just kind of wrap up with what Ma Raven was saying. You know, he said he laid down 3 things. He's like, RuneScape is a game written for a wide range of people, adults as well, not just children. 2, to simply not that simply is not how M ratings are formed, at least over here. And then he goes, 3, it is relevant. It is a relevant aspect of the character, and it is just an aspect of the character in regards to Angoff.
Yeah, I think that summed it up perfectly. You know, there's plenty of times in a story where like you'll mention some straight person's ex-partner, but the second you bring up a same-sex ex-partner, then that's the end of the world, and it's stupid. So yeah, unless you had anything else to add on there, what did you want to cover next?
Oh, sure. So here's the deal. So they covered all the media backlash on Angoff, so I want to move on from there. But I was in contact with Maud Michelle at the time, and I sent over some of the articles I wrote on queer characters, and that also prompted Maud Raven and Maud Matty. Is that how you pronounce it? Matty?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Then they also posted in that thread and kind of just like laid down that Jagex is going to move forward with current reference characters and new characters in the future. And that's where Maud Raven hinted at saying, hey, there's characters that haven't been outed yet. And over time, as stories emerge, they likely will. But the narrative should not be forced to tell the story if it's not appropriate. But they are there. So they were kind of satisfying my request for more queer characters at the time without literally revealing the next piece that I want to talk about, which is Slisuke's Endgame. And
right,
do you want to talk about that a little bit, Slisuke's Endgame?
I haven't done it yet, so I'm actually going to ask you, how spoilery does this get as far as like the main plot of that quest?
So I don't have to cover the main plot of the quest. And I'm trying to dance around here.
So
a
we're
little
just
bit,
talking about side dialogue, really?
Yes, it's basically, so the way the quest is structured is that you talk to the gods at the start. That's how you start.
You don't need to fully explain it to me. I just wanted to know. Yeah, I just wanted to let people know that it's like slight
dialogue.
Yeah, so won't actually spoil the main quest for you if you haven't done it yet. But yeah, we'll go ahead and talk about it. Go ahead and say what you want.
Okay, so as we know, Slisuke's endgame is gathering all the gods, and one of the gods you can speak to is Armadil. And if you're not familiar with Armadil, he's the AVNC that the bird-like creature from Abana that ascended to godhood. So hopefully you're familiar. And kind of just hidden in his dialogue is where Jagex drops that Armadil is indeed gay, or maybe not necessarily gay, but that he had 2 husbands and he had adopted children. And that's what I found really particularly interesting, is the way they introduce this. And I'll talk about the community reaction to that in a second, but are you okay with me reading this little snippet?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. It doesn't spoil Slisuke's endgame, so forewarned, but it does spoil his a little bit of his history. And there's a crap ton of dialogue to go through, but this is just a small portion. So you can ask Armadil a few questions, and one of those being like, can you tell me about your family? And he says, being immortal gives you a different way of thinking about families over centuries. And I have had several families over the years, and I have loved each one of them equally. And I have been a son only once, but a father and a husband I have been twice. So that's where he drops that. And then you go, tell me about your parents. We were talking long time ago, so long that none who carry my family name, save myself, still live. My father was a scholar. He gathered the history of our people and recorded them for the future. My mother, perhaps ironically, was a priestess of an old religion, and she taught me and the other children the legends of the spirits, and that she believed forged our world. It was a simple life and a good one, and I like to think they raised me well. So that's when you can ask him about his marriages. And he says, I have been married twice so far. Hesmade was my first marriage. He was a proud and noble warrior, one of the generals in my first Guardians. We lived a long and happy life together, but age catches up to us all in the end, and he died peacefully in his sleep. Should we all be so lucky? And then you go, I'm sorry. And he talks about that loss briefly. But he goes on to say, my second marriage was with Obi Sooth, a simple farmer. Obi taught me to appreciate the simpler things, helped ground me, and I had lived as a god for so long at that point. It was reassuring to remember that what a hard day's work is like. But Obi was taken from me, not by age or by disease, but by the final retribution of a defeated god. And that is why I can never forgive Zamorak for his actions. So that's really telling. And then to wrap it up is where he goes, tell me about your children. I adopted Ray Arth and Tepras during my first marriage. Both have been tragically orphaned by the harsh trials of Abana and left without a tribe to care for them. Ray Arth was a scholar to be. She was fascinated by stories and history, and each day she would come to me with new tales and tell the new things she had discovered. I came to visit her on her deathbed and surrounded by her grandchildren. She promised me that death was but another story to discover. The nature of divinity means that I will sadly never get to hear it. Tepras, now there was a troublemaker. Tepper's delight in practical jokes. He would set up assorted pranks, and there would be sufferance for all the tribes. Once he set up an elaborate contraption to make it appear as though my temple was haunted. Spent most of the afternoon calming some of my more delicate followers. He grew up to be quite skilled as a tribe leader. Much to all of our surprise, his pranks were born out of a strong sense of empathy, which he was able to use to lead the tribe through trying times. My time as a father has been a blessed one, and I wouldn't change it. So that's kind of his family history, where they drop the armadillo is not straight.
That's really cool. I don't remember if I learned about that or not, but that's Let's have more queer gods, please.
Right, that's what I was thinking too.
Let's sit Mod Raven down and make him watch the first season of American Gods, and then be like, all right, so now can we get more gods like that? I don't know if you've seen that show yet, but there is a lot.
I know what you're referencing. Yes,
okay.
yes. Totally. And that's what Mod Raven was hinting from back in 2014. So
yeah,
this
that's
has
really
been planned
cool.
out.
Yeah.
This was not shoehorned in, as some people said on Reddit following Slisuke's endgame quest. And although I would say the reception was a bit warmer than when it came to Engoff, just by looking at Reddit in itself.
Yeah, I mean,
which I know is not a perfect measurement.
Well, it's also, I mean, you can measure that in the world. Like, gay men are way more accepted than almost any other group, but especially more than. I mean, even trans men are more accepted than trans women, and there's sexist reasons for that we don't need to really cover. But yeah, I think that's definitely a thing where like a male gay character will bring up way less of a shitstorm than if it was a woman.
Right. And I really appreciate the dialogue in it that they wrote here. It seems a bit more, to me personally, polished than Engoff's wedding ring dialogue. It seems like more time and care was put into that.
Yeah, it does. And I wonder, it could partially be because, like you said, they were planning this for at least, from what, from the information that you gathered, it could be very much possible that this is what they're talking to along with other relationships. But I think, having a couple years to plan something versus taking a suggestion from a player could be why this dialogue works better. But yeah, I definitely agree. I super like it. Still has the problematic element of, like, of course, all of why can't Armadillo have a husband who's alive, but
right,
right. Maybe we'll get a quest that's Armadillo's wedding. That would be an amazing quest.
Yeah, the great Armadillo, great AVNC wedding. No, and it does suck because, again, dead queer characters, seems to be the trope in a lot of media, I guess. But I also understand why some of them are dead, just because, like, he's a god and they die and then,
yeah.
But
I mean,
I would,
yeah, and then that's the hard thing about tropes too, is because in some circumstances you can be like, okay, well, it kind of makes sense here, but it's also like you could also be like, okay, fine, he has dead husbands, but why wouldn't he get married again? And then that you could fix that whole issue, or if there if there were 100 queer characters in RuneScape, then we wouldn't care that Armadillo's the one with dead husbands.
Yeah,
right? But
there's more variety.
Yeah, when you only have like how many characters? Maybe 5 characters here that we've talked about. When you have like 5 characters and like the majority of them are either dead or have dead partners, like you can see the line that is forming there.
I totally agree with that. That, like, it's just like, okay, this is a tired trope now. Like, you need to upset the trend, And I also find it really interesting that that's where he says, that is why I can never forgive Zamorak for his actions. I'm like, holy shit! No one, excuse my language again, but like, holy crap! No wonder.
You can say shit on this.
Oh, show. Okay. But like, that's why he hates Zamorak so much. Like, yeah. I mean, despite their ideology like being so different, but like that was personal there.
Yeah, it's funny too because like headcanon, my headcanon, like Zamorak is like super gay, so
oh yeah I can totally, very homoerotic.
yeah, okay, good. I'm not the only one who thinks that. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it'd be interesting if we can do a love quarrel quest there, where like Zamorak was actually Armadillo's tilted lover, and that's why this all happened. There we go.
You know who else I want to be? It's a headcanon for me too. The Raptor. You know, one of the signature heroes.
God. Yeah.
God damn. So okay. So for a while, like I can't, and I did not prepare this for the show, but I do want to talk about it briefly. So just take it as I say it, you know, and I'm happy to be critiqued later. But I vaguely remember when the Raptor came out, JX was like specifically super vague about the Raptor's pronouns and gender, and under all that armor, like who could quote unquote tell. And now that they've kind of largely abandoned the signature heroes, you know, from recent content, I would like to think that the Raptor is this like butch lesbian, like under all that armor, just like a whole full on bull dyke going on there. And
I like it.
It would be like a Samus Aran type thing. Yeah. You know, like you ever play the Metroid on the Game Boy?
No, but of course I know Samus because Samus is another character that's like canonically trans, but like in a really weird way.
Right. And my favorite part is when she lifted off that helmet, and you know, internet was in its infancy back then, and like you got a lot of your information from your friends. A lot of people were calling Samus he. And when that helmet comes off, they like all these boy gamers that were part of my elementary school just like simultaneously like shit their pants.
Yeah. It's a great moment in gaming for sure. Like
yeah, and I want them to pull that off with the Raptor.
I'm into that. I like that as an idea. So we have given Jagex a lot of good quest ideas. During this podcast.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening with the signature heroes though.
In conclusion, Jagex, you know, get on that work. That is the whole point of this. I think that brings us pretty much to the end, unless you have something else here that you wanted to say.
No, that pretty much wraps it up for me. I will make my final plea to Jagex to get on it, make it happen. You know, we got some. Hit us up on Twitter or whatever, you know. We got
ideas.
We got ideas. You know, we'll help you out. We got two awesome people here to help write that dialogue.
All right. Well, thank you very much for putting this show together. Like I said at the beginning, it wouldn't have been on this topic without your work, so that's greatly appreciated. I'm sure we will be back soon once we kind of have something more set up as to what we're going to do for the next episode. They won't all be something like this, of course. It might return more to what Ladies Night used to be for those people who have been listening from the beginning. But thank you everyone who tuned in to listen to this first episode with a new co-host. And you can find me in game at Hana Quinn. That is HANA space Quinn. And Alice, where can people get at you in game if they want to reach you?
You can reach me at Malice space Alice in game.
All right, I love that. I love that username too.
Yeah, and if you see an Alice Malice, that's not me. So it's backwards. So World 23, hit me up.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening, everybody, and have a week.